Hello, everyone. As we are waiting for everybody to get signed in, you will see a poll on your screen that's just asking if you have attended any of our webinars before. If you can take a second and fill that out, that'd be great, but it is not required. As we wait, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Madison Burnett, and I'm a BCBA. I lead our professional development program, and I'll be available to support through today's webinar. In addition to that role, I work alongside other BCBAs on our clinician-led recruitment team, and I support in the effort of recruiting quality professionals to join our team. If you are interested in joining us, please indicate so in the post-webinar survey at the end of this webinar, or you can email careers@manhattanpsychologygroup.com. All right, on the next slide, you will see, I'd like to tell you a little bit about Manhattan Psychology Group. We were first established in 2011 and have continued to grow our team consisting of skilled adult and child psychologists, neuropsychologists, behavior analysts, special educators, licensed social workers, and behavior interventionists. As a team, we're committed to wraparound care, which includes our wide range of services from mental health and testing to ABA and educational services. This holistic approach allows us to address various needs and challenges with compassion and care. We provide services to clients out of our Upper West Side and Long Island City offices in home, school, and clinic-based settings, as well as through telehealth. Our team is committed to serving individuals, couples, and families of all ages in diverse settings. We're also pleased to offer these free monthly webinars for parents and professionals where we'll continue to learn and foster meaningful connections. Our vision at MPG is to create a future where individuals and their families feel supported, connected, and empowered. Our mission is to provide a multidisciplinary, integrated support for individuals and their families who experience mental health, behavioral, and educational challenges. In an effort to stand by that mission and vision, we are thrilled to offer free 20-minute phone consultations with our clinical team. You can schedule time by visiting our website, or you can follow the link that I'll be putting in the chat momentarily. All right, on the next slide, you will see Child and Family Therapy Collective. Um, Child and Family Therapy Collective looks at the whole child and family. They are dedicated to helping families find their way through the toughest moments by bringing research and reason together to create solutions. Eleanor's team is trained in cognitive behavioral therapy with mindful integration and provides services virtually in Mississippi and Tennessee and in-person community sessions in Nashville as needed. Right. On the next slide, you'll see some housekeeping information. This webinar is eligible for contact hours for New York State licensed psychologists and social workers. A link for the quiz regarding the content of this presentation will be posted in the chat and on the calendars within the last 5 to 10 minutes of this presentation. As of January 1st, we have started charging a nominal fee for continuing education certificates. This webinar is still free to attend, but will be a $10 for psychologists and $5 for social workers to obtain that contact hour certificate for this live webinar. If you are not seeking contact hours and you're only needing a certificate of completion, please email professionaldevelopment@manhattanpsychologygroup.com with this request following the webinar. Any polls during this webinar are not required to get your certificate, but they are encouraged. We will be leaving the chat open, but please post any questions in the Q&A so we can make sure that they are seen. And if there's time at the end of this presentation, Erika and Eleanor will answer some of these questions. All right, on the next slide, I'm excited to introduce today's speakers, Dr. Erika Stapert and Eleanor Ezell. Dr. Erika Stapert is a New York State licensed psychologist who specializes in parent-child interaction therapy modalities that can be provided in person, but are also very amenable to telehealth, as they are focused on teaching parents home-based skills that improve the children's emotional and behavioral regulation to enhance the parent-child relationship. She has provided individuals, family, and group therapy in a variety of settings, including Head Start programming, a therapeutic nursery, and other outpatient clinical settings. Eleanor is a licensed clinical social worker and the founder and clinical director at Child and Family Therapy Collective. Her expertise includes working with children and teens with selective mutism, social anxiety, autism, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and oppositional defiant disorder with co-occurring developmental delays. Eleanor also trains, teaches, and synthesizes her training for families with typically developing children. Eleanor believes that all families deserve access to research and accessible resources from the experts. And now, without further ado, I'll hand it over to Erika and Eleanor.
I was on mute. Thank you so much for that kind introduction, Madison. It's a pleasure to be here with you both. And just as to kind of give some insight into where this talk came from, Eric and I were at a conference a while back and chit-chatting and thought it would be a great way, some great information to bring to you guys directly outside of a conference setting, which really thrills me. As Madison said, all of this work comes from a strong line of researchers and therapists bringing our heads together. And a lot of what you'll see here today is a combination of various people's work who are listed here. Um, and there'll be some great links of resources as we move along. So we are really going to dive into um, identifying parenting values and how you can apply your values in a way that works with your particular family, or if you're a clinician, how you can help families do this. What we know is that good research is only as good as the people in the study. And so one of the focuses that I have, and I know Erika has, is kind of wrapping that in a way that is really applicable to a lot of different people, and we can tailor it to everyone who's ever in front of us. Or if you're a parent watching this, you can tailor this to yourself. But just remember that your values are really at the heart of that formula. The next thing that we're going to focus on learning today is setting up meaningful parenting goals and a timeline for such. And doing so in a way that is not overwhelming to your home system. We know that moving too quickly is not helpful. We want to understand key parenting strategies and how to implement them. We are going to review some. There are lots of ways that you can learn more. So if you're lost on one of those strategies, there'll be some resources and places that we can direct you to learn more specifically. We want to look at the impact of social media's influence on our parenting. After 2020, there was this huge surge of online parenting platforms, which in theory is great, but what we see in clinic, and Erika and I could talk about this all day long, is that it's not necessarily all that helpful to a parent, especially when you're stressed out and really worried about what the next day is going to look like. These quick fixes are not all that helpful. So we'll talk about some accounts specifically and some things more generally, and also what you're going to look for as a parent or professional to guide your clients or your own family to pick the right resources for yourself. And then we want to explore treatment options. So we'll go through briefly what good evidence-based treatment looks like, what the pieces of that puzzle are, primarily parent management training and PCIT for behavioral challenges. And I just want to plug that when people use those terms, they are big terms. And so you can have a lot of different types of kids that are helped by those treatments. And it's the clinician's job to tailor it directly to your child. So just in case you've ever been with a clinician who hasn't done that, you're looking for somebody who is tailoring it directly to you and talking to you exactly in session about how to do that. So we're really going to dive into the impact of social media. We know that social media is not all that helpful for our adult brains and our teens and our kids. But when we're looking at the impact on parenting choices, there are a couple of really big influencers out there that their accounts surged in 2020 and 2021 that have put out some information that, in my professional opinion, is unethical and unhelpful. So Dr. Becky Goodinside, Big Little Feelings, these are two very large accounts that you have probably come across as a clinician or as a parent. And personally, I steer all families away from parenting social media because they are influencers. Some are clinicians and some are putting really great work out there, and that's helpful. But no matter what an influencer puts on the internet, it is one slice of information that cannot be generalized to your child or your parenting as a whole, because we don't exist on a slide, we exist in relation to other people. So that's really important to remember when we're looking at all of these things and, seeing a post and the impact on how we behave. And we also know that bibliotherapy, like reading a book to change our behavior, doesn't have a very big impact on what we actually do. Changing the way we do something at home requires one-on-one work and that is really tailored to your family. And that's what we want to drive home today, that fine if you're on social media, go and learn, but challenge it. And Erica and I will talk about how to challenge it quietly at home. But I just want to make myself really clear that these are two accounts I don't recommend following. Dr. Becky Good Inside and Big Little Feelings, because there have been multiple things that have been problematic, and they're not the only ones. Yes, we will also offer you guys resources on more acceptable accounts that are more helpful, even if bibliotherapy still is not very helpful overall. So if you guys can, there's a poll that I think is going to pop up. Do I need to click that?
Yeah, I have launched it.
Okay,
Can you
great.
see it?
Oh, I have to open it. Okay. So where are you currently getting your parenting advice and guidance from as a parent? We would really love to hear from you guys. Things that a lot of families I work with say is Instagram, our pediatrician, our friends, my mom group. Um, Dads will tell me that they talk at soccer practice, all over the place. And um, the Bump app, Instagram, those are some good ones. I don't know the Bump app. Mommy and Me groups. Yeah, these are all really common responses. And if you are interested in this particular talk, I would imagine Instagram is a pretty popular answer. So we'll let you guys continue to fill out that poll as we go on. Perfect. So one of the things that we want to make sure we're targeting and understanding is what are the parenting approaches that we're encountering. So gentle parenting, as you see in this blue box here, is not actually a research term. And the terminology that we want to lean on a little bit more is more evidence-based, which means there's been a lot of research behind it, randomized control trials, things we think of as sciencey research. We want to stick with those terms because those are more appropriately regulated terminology. Someone just added to the slides what I learned from my mother. Exactly. That is very commonplace. We only know what we were taught. So when we're looking at these parenting approaches, we might not even have a term for what we are using, but we can look at the terminology like gentle parenting, nurturing parenting, positive parenting, conscious discipline, authoritative, authoritarian. These are all different types of parenting. And there are a lot of terms out there that you're going to run across. So I want to let everyone know, especially if you're a parent, this is confusing to clinicians sometimes. And so if you're confused, that doesn't surprise either of us at all. And we can get stuck in those terms very easily. Yeah, so here's that list. You'll see all of them here. Permissive and neglectful. Yeah. All right. So we're going to scooch over to some parenting buzzwords that come up, particularly on social media. We have that gentle parenting, conscious discipline, positive parenting, and nurturing parenting. So these all of these parenting guides, I would say, they're not parenting styles by the research terms, but they all have similar values: empathy, boundaries, or not providing boundaries. And they're all kind of under the umbrella of what we call authoritative parenting. Authoritative parenting is high warmth, so much love, so much affection, and also high demand. So when you need to put your shoes on, it's time to put your shoes on. And all of these fall under that umbrella. Now, one thing that's happened on social media is gentle parenting and conscious discipline in particular have kind of veered off course to a level that, as a clinician, is quite concerning. I imagine, Erica, you agree with that. And the definitions of them are not consistent. So when one person's talking about gentle parenting or positive parenting or conscious discipline or nurturing parenting, they might be talking about something that's completely different. So they're hard to compare and contrast based on just typical conversations. So really, if you can go to the next slide, perfect. What we really want to do is look at one family's values. What is it that you actually want to be teaching? Go to the next slide, please. And values are beliefs that each person considers are important for themselves and possibly for humanity as a whole. So oftentimes values are things like we value kindness, we value sharing our time. It can be something like religion or um, giving back to our community or family dinners. They come in many shapes and sizes. But it's really the thing that influences our behaviors and attitudes and impacts our decisions and relationships. If we're making values based decisions, we're probably behaving from a much more grounded state. And when we're grounded, we tend to make better decisions for our particular family. That doesn't mean it's the right decision for another family. We're going to make better parenting decisions and things that we're very sure about. So, values are extraordinarily important as individuals and as parents and as clinicians. Um, and just as a quick example, Erica and I both value helping families and children thrive in their world, and so we do this work because we love it and it's our job. Both of those things have value, but we would probably wouldn't do this work if we didn't value supporting children and families, right? I see you nodding your head. So I definitely wouldn't. There are probably easier jobs I could take. I could not build a business. I could do a lot of things that would serve me in other ways, but I love this work and it's very ingrained in who I am because it's in my value set. When I do my own values, helping people is always at the top of my list. And I do that in a lot of different ways. And so you'll see when a value is integrated appropriately or in a healthy way, that you see it pop up throughout somebody's life in a lot of different spots. So, parenting values are those principles, just like I was giving the example of my job, and they're principles and standards of behavior. So, here are some great examples in parenting. So, honesty, we tell the truth in our family, it maintains trust. Empathy, treating others with compassion and understanding. Family time, having that one on one common interest time, whether it's family dinners or activities. Families functions a lot of different ways to get that family time. So just because family time is a value doesn't mean it has to look the same in any particular family. Loving one another and being kind, loyalty, supporting each other and not kind of running away when there's a hard moment, perseverance, respect. I love the perseverance one because you can get a really gritty family and gritty kids by teaching them how to approach something that's difficult. And respecting, right? We, no matter what, we respect people and our family with care and politeness, even if we disagree with them. These are all things we can teach through our value systems without demanding it or saying someone is right or wrong. So those are just some examples. And there are a couple of ways that if you're at home and you're saying, oh my gosh, this is totally overwhelming, how do I do this? Here are a couple of links here that you can do a little values card sort so you can figure out what is it that I want to promote in my family. And then what you want to do is work together with your parenting partner, with your kids, whoever's you're interested in doing this with, and kind of organize what are our maybe top 3 things that we care about a lot and how do we want to prioritize those. If we're living from that values-based perspective, whether it's in parenting or just as a human being, as an individual, you're probably going to get into a world that feels really good to you, which is what all of us want. Now, that's not easy, but here are 2 resources that you can use, and we'll share some more later as well. So this next poll, I'm really curious what, if you have thought about it, what our listeners here, what some of your top values are in your parenting. Things that I often hear are one-on-one time and that everyone feels really loved and seen. So empathy, compassion. I have some families that sports are a value, so keeping active. Someone is saying they're not receiving the polls in the chat, so I'm curious about that. I think Madison will help us out with that. Maybe we can throw that link into the chat if possible. So if you're not receiving the polls, go ahead and throw it into the chat if you can, and we will be able to check it out there.
I can
Uh,
also launch a different poll for those who can't see the word cloud.
okay, cool. Awesome. Common parenting values that we see. Oh, very cool. So that should be showing up. There we go. Thank you, Madison. Um, all right. Awesome. So, uh, oftentimes people will say respect is a family value, or a belief in a God, whoever that is for a family, or quiet time. I have a family that I currently work with. Their top parenting value is that everyone is able to take quiet time by themselves and do that successfully without falling apart, which has been tricky. And we've had to work really hard on it, but we're getting there because we know that that's kind of our guiding light in all the work that we do together, which is really wonderful. While that is popping up, I'm going to go ahead and shift on.
It
Um,
looks like really quickly, Eleanor, I can see with the poll here, I think honesty is a really big one for people. And then we have other values of forgiveness, bonding, I think hearing one another, telling love, showing togetherness, respect, children, and communication.
Those are all really, really good ones. And what you notice about all of those values that are listed is those are all things we have to teach. They're not automatic. We are born and we do those things automatically. We teach those things through modeling our own behavior. If, say, respect, if someone's having an argument at home and I, as a parent, am yelling, "Don't you dare do that," that's not a respectful way to approach my anger. Um, it is my feeling, maybe. It might be really hard to do that. There's always space for improvement here, to be able to live our own values. And so identifying them and saying, okay, how am I actually going to do this is very important. You want to take it from there, Erica?
Sure. Yeah. So now that we've reviewed what values are, and we've talked a little bit about then what values are important to all of you who are attending, I'm going to talk a little bit about how we can actually use our values to shape our parenting style. So Eleanor already referred to the authoritative parenting style, spoke a little bit about what that is, but I just want to delve a little bit more deeply into that. So, really, the authoritative parenting style, it's all about setting clear expectations and really firm limits while also being responsive to your child's needs, providing warmth, support, and open communication. So, as Eleanor had stated, it's really that nice balance between high demand. So, really setting those clear expectations, requiring your children to do certain things and being really consistent with those expectations, but then also providing them that warmth and that empathy and maybe that one-on-one attention, showing them how much you value them. And we really see that creating that balance in a parenting style really leads to the best outcomes, which I'll be talking about in just a little bit. So you're really striking that balance between structure and flexibility. You're explaining reasons behind your rules. You're encouraging independence and critical thinking in your children. Here are some of the values that are common to an authoritative parenting style. So you can see that some of these are also similar to the values that came up when Eleanor was talking about other parenting approaches and recommendations that are out there. But really, if we look at the foundation of this authoritative parenting style, which research has actually shown to lead to the best outcomes, we see that the prime values in this parenting stance or approach are open communication, clear expectations, warmth, empathy, support, independence, really respecting your child's opinions while setting those firm limits though. And that's where you can have kind of, something that's expected, but giving choice and options within that expectation. And also though, enhancing or fostering responsibility and creating boundaries. So, what are the results of an authoritative parenting style? And as you'll hear, Eleanor and I, we really rely on the data and the research. And so, what does the research say about an authoritative parenting style? We actually see that it can lead to increased academic achievement. So, Children who perceive their parents as authoritative, remembering that high demand and high warmth balance, are more likely to do well in school. Also, we see that this parenting style really fosters that independence and self reliance, which obviously can help children really navigate into and throughout adulthood. Self esteem, right? I think we all want our children to feel good about themselves. And research shows that children raised by authoritative parents often have high self esteem. Also, social skills, right? This is such a key component of being able to navigate life, right? Do well in school is really being able to socialize and interact with other children. And we see that children raised by authoritative parents really develop these healthy social skills. Once again, because authoritative parenting is really fostering and valuing those really important values, right? Like empathy and respect that obviously are essential for children to develop in order to relate well to other people. We also see that an authoritative parenting style really leads to better mental health outcomes. So, some research has indicated that it can help protect against mood disorders like depression. And then lastly, it just overall leads to greater life satisfaction. So, a national study found that children who experienced more authoritative parenting in elementary school really had higher levels of life satisfaction. All right, now I'm going to turn it back over to Eleanor to talk a little bit about how to effectively navigate social media.
This is the hard part, I think. Our world is so, we all have the shiny object syndrome. Oh, that idea is really going to help me. Oh, this one post is going to help me. But let's be real about it. What is on social media is not perfection. It's also not reality at all. This is a perfect example. We think potty training, we've all done it with somebody. We think potty training is smooth sailing. And then you do it, and it is comical how unregulated it is. It's wild. You're teaching a very difficult skill to a toddler who doesn't have much impulse control at all. And the toilet paper is very fun. So just remember, keep this kind of image on your head. Remember that what I see from that family who tells me they're doing X, Y, or Z on social media, I'm following them. That is not actually what's happening in their home. People are unlikely to show you every tantrum, every meltdown that are completely developmentally normal, even when their children are doing beautifully, just like we want them to, and all kids can. So just keep that in mind as we proceed. Social media is not reality. If you need to put it on a sticky note on your fridge or on your computer, please do so. The other hot tip I like to do is tell people to, whatever little reminder you need, put it on your phone screen so it's the first thing you see before you open Instagram. But when you get on there, what I want you to do when you're navigating is to think about, if you can start clicking, perfect, who made the post? If something is anonymous, I would be concerned. That's a big red flag. Does the post have a title or hashtags? Is it sensational content? Is it trying to get your attention? Is it marketing, or is it evidence-based information? Is this somebody who was a parent who decided to be a parent coach? Or is this someone who is a licensed clinician with extensive training and is talking about something very important called nuance? I am a big fan of content that, at least somewhere on the page, in a prominent manner, the poster, the person whose account it is talking about, not every piece of content in here will be helpful for you at every moment. And if you're not discussing nuance, you're not doing it right. It is impossible to talk about that every single post because people aren't reading the captions. Remember that. You have to be considering nuance in every single piece of content that you take in. Even think about like marketing for a store. Same thing, right? Like they're creating an image. We don't look like them. They're airbrushed. It's not the same. It's just not the same. And so when we are looking at this content, we really want to say, is it anecdotal or is it evidence-based? Is someone saying, oh, my child did this, and so thus it works for everybody? Or growing research shows that generally X, Y, and Z are true. but there's an exception to every research rule, right? Is it a professional or a personal? Are they selling something related to the product, the topic? If people are giving things away for free, maybe, and they're just being generous, that tends to be less of a red flag for me, but I still want to look at it carefully. And is it a generalizable effective approach? All of those things, if you get all green flags, fine. It still might not be right for your child. So question everything you're seeing and take it to a trusted professional who is not gaining from you, benefiting from you engaging with their account. So when we look at navigating this community, a colleague of mine, whose account is Dr. Jenica, a couple years ago, we created something called a safe list that people are loving. It is about 250 accounts that, as of about a year ago, were generally acceptable, run by evidence-based practitioners, and many of us looked at this list together. If an account is not on this list, I would not follow it. Now, if you look at my account, I follow some of them so I know what people are putting out there that we have to fight against. So just throwing that out there. But what you want to look at, large accounts are not necessarily better. Most of the time they have a big marketing budget and they're selling something to make a living, which I admire the ability to do so, but that doesn't mean it's right for your kid. Those are two different things. Look at training history of professionals, look at the nuance. If someone is a coach, a behavior coach, or a parent coach, run away unless they're licensed. And I will also say, not all licensed professionals have good training. So there are also some licensed professionals who have put out very concerning things on social media that are extraordinarily incorrect. So you're welcome to register on there. That does put you on my email list, just full disclosure. You're welcome to get off of it once you get the safe list. Erika, I'm going to turn it back to you for looking at some of these evidence-based parenting strategies here.
Sounds good. Right. So when you are navigating social media, one thing that can be really helpful is to look out for certain recommendations that are based in evidence-based parenting strategies. And, these really come from, treatment programs that have developed out of research, such as dialectical behavior therapy, parent-child interaction therapy, parent management training, space, the list goes on. And I'll kind of give a slide at the end that gives a bit of an overview. But I want to go through some of these just to give some guidance on what to really be on the lookout for. I won't have the time to get into the nitty-gritty of each strategy. That would be a topic for another day, but this is at least to give you an idea of what you can be looking for. And if these are the things that you're seeing in a certain account, then that might be a place of really sound advice coming from an evidence-based position. So first and foremost is time in, and this is something that I could probably talk about all day long, or at least for an hour, all in and of itself. Time in, I think, is probably the best parenting strategy that you can use right from the get-go. Any type of evidence-based parent training program is going to start with time in. What is time in? It's really just a time where you are one-on-one with your child. You're playing at their developmental level and you're following their lead. So you might be putting out some activities that that they enjoy, but you're really letting them be in the driver's seat. You're along for the ride and you're just paying really close attention to them, commenting on what they're doing, praising what they're doing, just showing them that they are kind of the center of your universe in that moment, and you appreciate and love them so much. And really, what this develops is that connective tissue of the parent-child relationship. So, what we actually see is that if you're putting an effort into having time in with your child, they're feeling respected, appreciated, loved. They're so used to getting positive attention from you. Then, when you set an expectation, you tell them to maybe do something that they typically don't want to do because you've built that foundation of a really positive parent-child relationship through the use of time in, they're going to be more motivated to rise to the occasion and meet that expectation. So time in, first and foremost, the thing that you want to be implementing with your children. Now, one thing that Eleanor and I want to convey to all of you is that time in does not necessarily mean you have to use time out. I know time out is one of those buzzwords out there. It's controversial. What do we think about it? Is it good? Is it not? We'll get into that a little bit later. But I would say you can definitely have time in without implementing time out. What I wouldn't do is implement time out without implementing time in. All right. Another key parenting strategy that's based in the research is validation. This really comes from the work of Marshall Linehan with dialectical behavior therapy. So, what is it? It's really just communicating to your child that their feelings make sense and are understandable given the situation. So, it doesn't necessarily mean that you really like or agree with what they're saying, what they're doing, or you might not even actually get how they're feeling, but it's still coming from a place of understanding. Okay, I might not get angry about my, shoe not going on just the right way, but I understand that that's something really frustrating and aggravating to you. I see you, I hear you, I understand you. And so, why do we validate? It really helps children identify their own emotions. So it's building up that emotional intelligence. It's helping them learn kind of how they're feeling. And they're getting a better sense of, okay, this is the feeling that I have in my body. This is kind of how I'm behaving. Someone is saying, now I'm feeling this way. Okay, I'm connecting the dots. And guess what? If they get a better understanding of how they're feeling in the moment, and how to label that, they will be better able eventually to communicate how they're feeling verbally instead of behaviorally. And that's what we all want. We would much rather have our child look at us and say, I'm really angry at you right now, versus kicking and screaming and carrying on and just having a big tantrum. Next is validation really decreases the intensity of the emotion. So just that experience of like knowing that someone else understands or sees how you're feeling can kind of bring that intensity of the emotion down a notch. So you might have had the experience of you walk in from like a really hard day at work or whatever you were doing throughout the day, and maybe your partner just looks at you and says, "Wow, you seem exhausted," or "You seem really overwhelmed right now." And that might take your shoulders from being like all the way up here and so tense and tight to maybe just down a little bit, feeling a little bit more relaxed because you feel like someone else gets where you're coming from. And then, as I've been saying, it really helps your child feel and understood. If you're stating their feeling in the moment, they're feeling like, wow, someone else gets me in this moment. My feeling is valid. They might not agree with how I'm feeling in this moment, but at least my feeling is valid. And when children feel like their feelings are valid, they can trust themselves more. And that tends to then lead to more emotional regulation, as well as that trust between parent and child, as well as between them and others as well. So how do we validate? The first step is really just to actively listen and notice. So it's kind of like looking through the weeds also. If your child's having a big, huge meltdown or tantrum, it's really easy to hone in on the behavior, say things like, stop crying, it's not that bad, settle down. But what we really want to do is look through the behavior and identify the feeling that's being expressed. And then you're going to describe it. So you might just say, wow, you are feeling so frustrated right now. And then what you want to be sure to do is focus on using and instead of but. So our tendency, our natural inclination is to say something like, I see that you're so frustrated with having to go to school today, but we still have to get out the door. And unfortunately, what that does is it kind of negates the first part of that statement, the part where you were actually noticing how your child is feeling, that your child is frustrated. You're kind of just brushing it to the side and saying, but we have to get out the door. And that actually leads to feeling invalidated. So I know it might sound very nuanced and very nitpicky, but if you think about how this statement sounds or feels of, I hear you're really frustrated about having to go to school today, and we do need to get out the door. That holds both things as truth. You can still set that expectation at that boundary while still holding on to how the child is feeling about it and respecting that. Some other things to be looking out for are, are people who are posting on social media talking about clear and consistent rules, family values, and expectations. Consistency really is always the main key here, right? Yes, there are some specific strategies to follow, but really it's more so the consistency behind the strategy that is important than the strategy itself. Now, things in terms of how we can set this consistency, we can have house rules, right? Basically making it really clear what is okay and not okay within your family. So if you have a value of, let's say, respect, you might have a house rule of no unkind language, right? And then you're obviously going to follow that up with either something, that the child receives, and we can talk more about that in a little bit, if they are able to abide by these house rules, and then of course having a consequence in place if they're not able to. Also, our posters talking about clearly communicated commands, right? We need to make sure that when we're giving commands to children, we're really direct with our language. We're stating these commands in a positive way, telling kids always what to do instead of what not to do. We want to be really specific in our language, giving an explanation, right? That goes back to those tenets of authoritative parenting, where yes, we're communicating expectations, but we're providing a rationale. So it's not just a dictatorship of do this, now do that, right? Our children know exactly why they're being told to do these things and why these things are important. Always giving commands in a polite and respectful way, and only when necessary. Okay, so these are the things that you're looking out for when people are talking about how to give directives and how to guide your children. Routines can be really great as well. And then, of course, modeling family values. And Eleanor already has spoken about that in terms of if you have a value of using kind language and respect in your family, you, of course, want to model that as well. Even in those tough moments where you might be frustrated, how can you rein that in and still be respectful in what you say and what you do? Then you want to look out for how are posters saying you should be reinforcing these positive behaviors. And if you're seeing things like give your child positive attention, give them labeled praise, reward them, these are all based in evidence. We have the research that shows that these are the things that will reinforce positive behaviors and lead then to your child doing that behavior or whatever it is that you're expecting more often. And then, of course, we also need to have planned responses to not following the rules, family values, and expectations. And once again, this needs to be consistent, right? So the response to following the rules, values, and expectations needs to be consistent along with the response to when it's not being followed. And, our posters talking about a loss of a privilege or planned ignoring, right? Planned ignoring would look like you giving your child a heads up. Hey, the best way to ask me for things is to very politely say, Mom, can I have a cookie? The way we don't get what we want in this family is by whining and crying and tantruming. So if you do that, I'll label your feeling and show you I understand where you're coming from, but then I'm going to turn and ignore. I'm not going to pay attention to the whining, the tantruming, and crying. So you might say something like, I understand you really want a cookie right now, and you're feeling frustrated that you can't. And then your child continues to whine and carry on. You say, I'll help you when you're ready to ask nicely. And then you turn and ignore. And then last but not least, do we use timeout? And I know this is now a big topic with not a ton of time, but I'm going to turn it over to Eleanor to go through some of the research and kind of the thoughts out there currently about timeout.
Perfect. Thank you. The one thing I want to add before we jump into this is that planned ignoring, there's lots of names for that, but it is the most active thing you can do in parenting your child because it is intentional and there is an end to it. You always want to praise the regulation when the ignoring is done. So thank you so much. What, you know, you're getting whining, whining, whining. The kid stops whining and you're like, oh my gosh, thank goodness. You're going to say out loud, thank you for calming your body down. Now I can help you. They need to hear that, oh, mom's back to me or dad's back with me because I did exactly, we were consistent. They said they were going to stop paying attention when I did that. Now I'm not doing anymore. Now I get them back. And you haven't left their side. You're there the whole time unless they're hitting and kicking you. Then you need to go see a professional to help you figure out how to do that in a consistent way because it's very hard. Okay, taking us to Alexa and Siri. When you ask Alexa, can I put my kid in timeout? Alexa does not tell you the right answer based on research. Alexa tells you timeout is harmful to children. That's problematic, right? Alexa will also, if you ask it a different way, will say, there's no research supporting timeout that I can find. That's interesting. When there is actually a substantial amount of research out that is very good. When we talk about good research, it is excellent research in the community, in the scientific community. It's well respected and it was well done. So keep that in mind. Social media, Alexa, Siri, they're not telling us the truth here. And that doesn't mean you have to do it. It's just not accurate. So tell us what you guys think. Are you kind of all in on timeout? Depends on the kid, situation, never under any circumstance you would do timeout, or you're just lost in a sea of, I don't know what to do with my child or how we would like to do this in our family. I'm super curious what you guys are experiencing. Is there a Slido for this? Oh, there it is.
Yes, I don't know if you can see, Eleanor, it popped up. It looks like right now it's 100% voting for depends on the situation.
I love that so much because that's when, as a clinician, I agree. It does depend on the situation. And timeout is not an all encompassing solution. We don't leave our kids' side, and there's an appropriate way to do it. I also love that depends on the child. I completely agree. And so if you're seeing any content that's like, always do this or always do that, I would run the other way because no one is an always and no one is an always or never. Just like that is not human. And it's not really appropriate. So let's go ahead and look at some of these objectives to timeout that people do have in the media and around everything. There's increases emotion dysregulation, doesn't teach emotion regulation. By the way, these are not true. It's too hard to implement. That is hard. It is hard to implement. Turns into a wrestling match. That's interesting. Well, only a wrestling match if you are touching your child. Isolates when support is needed. A good timeout doesn't isolate. Re-traumatizes. There's actually research countering that. A good evidence-based timeout is not traumatizing. Now, if a child had been secluded, might we do it a little bit differently just out of respect? Absolutely, but it's not going to re-traumatize them. It doesn't work for my child. That might be true. But my bet, 99 times out of 100, and Erika, I bet you agree with this, is that if someone says it doesn't work for my child, it's because we haven't been doing an evidence-based timeout in the past. I've had one family in my whole career that actually was doing a PCIT timeout, and it was the wrong tool for the wrong kid. One time. He was too big. He was too old. He needed an older protocol. We were just using the wrong tool. A lesson in rejection. I have never heard that one personally, but parents do fear that, oh, well, I'm rejecting them. And so I just want to, where all of these objections come from, it's a concern of lack of connection. So remember, we don't ever recommend timeout unless you also have incredible time in together. We have to have connection for things like this to actually do what they're supposed to do. There was actually a PCIT study that was stopped because they did timeouts and stuff before they did time in, and it felt so poor. It worked, but it felt so yucky that they stopped doing it and flipped it around. So I like to use that little fun fact. Okay, so what did timeout originally mean? Timeout originally, can you pop to the next slide? So timeout is a brief removal from positive reinforcement. It's a break. That's all. It is a structured, practiced break when there is oppositionality or noncompliance. to something that has been taught in the past. There's a boundary set. We teach what happens if you don't listen, and or if you hit, there's a house rule, and it is a tool in our toolbox that we must use consistently and only in the times, in the situations in which we have taught the child that we will be using it. It is completely respectful when it's done well. It is a beautiful thing. It's hands off. We shouldn't be touching our child when they're pissed at us, because that will or could turn into a wrestling match. And we really want, it ends also with warmth. After there's a timeout, we always want to go back to time in, minimally something neutral. I call that my repair time with my kids. We say we get compliance. Okay, now repair and refill. Repair and refill that emotion bucket, so they know that even though they made a mistake and couldn't, or their brain couldn't listen yet, that you are still there even though their brain couldn't do it yet. You didn't leave. You're still in the room. You're right there. You're calm and consistent. And it's that toolbox to really manage and teach the child body that they're capable. So let's kind of push through this a little bit, because this is what I really want to get to, is, does timeout cause harm? The answer is no. Timeout does not cause harm. 2020 research showed that no impact on creativity or parent-child relationships was associated with timeout, that there was no increased risk of aggression, depression, or anxiety. We actually see the opposite, that those things come down because there is consistency. And consistency, as Erika said earlier, is the most important tool. Consistency and predictability of the reaction of my parent. I know what I'm going to get when I don't listen. I know what I'm going to get when I do listen. I know what I'm going to get when I hit. I know what I'm going to get when I do X, Y, or Z. Predictability. And when people are not appropriately implementing timeouts, that's when things get really, really, really tricky. We're going to take a look at what the CDC recommends, because that is a very trusted resource. So when your child does something dangerous, like running in the street, or something harmful like hurting another child, breaks a family rule, does not follow your direction after a warning, what we want to do is that the immediate removal of positive reinforcement and attention by the caregiver is recommended by the CDC. So exactly that patterning of we stop paying attention, or we stop giving our attention proactively when there's a negative something occurs, that is recommended by the CDC. I would think about this as attention is attention no matter when you give it. Whatever you're giving attention to is what will continue. And that's what the CDC is recommending. So that is a simplified way to think about that. They're saying that rules are established by the parent and reviewed and practiced. So if we want to teach and then implement, we always apply within the context of positive and engaging parent relationship. That's really important. So if you know somebody who has a really difficult relationship with their child and they're hurting them, this stuff would not be appropriate, right? As recommended by the CDC and everyone we know. And so we would obviously need to manage that differently. But for a healthy relationship, these boundaries are healthy to provide. The CDC recommends we provide in a calm yet firm tone. This is the rule. We don't want to scream because that changes things. And the consistency is the hardest and the most important. So if we say, I'm going to tell you 2 times and then you lose a privilege, tell them 2 times and then lose a privilege. That's the most important. If we give in and give in and give in, that changes things again. And timeout in particular, we want to use it sparingly. It's not the first line of defense. The first line of defense here is time in. The connection, that relational piece with your child that everybody loves so much. All right, so let's roll on to the next slide. We're going to go over a little bit, but that is okay. So the evidence, go up one. Yeah. And so the evidence here is that timeout is effective at reducing challenging behaviors across settings and different groups of kids. There's no long-term evidence of negative impact on emotional behavior functioning. It's actually the opposite. And when it's appropriately impacted, we are less likely to have an avoidant attachment, and more likely to have better mental health outcomes and better emotion regulation. So good timeout really teaches emotion regulation. All right, Erica, take it away with some of these strategies.
Right, great. So when navigating social media, even, if you have your child enrolled in treatment or you're engaging in parent training, you really want to go into things thinking critically about how you are going to identify and implement strategies. As we've spoken before, about the fact that nuance is important in terms of, yes, there are evidence-based treatments out there. We also need to be thinking sometimes about tailoring, making sure that that evidence-based treatment works or is implemented in such a way that will be effective for your particular child, because each child is different. So when you are working on identifying strategies that work for you, first you want to think about, do I have any concerns about any particular approach? Eleanor was talking about some of these posts are very sensational in nature. They're meant to like really reel you in and get you to jump on board and think, great, this is going to work for my kid. It worked for her. It's going to work for me. You want to take a step back and think critically about the particular approach and question, do I have any concerns about it? Does this approach align with my family's values? Because what might be okay for his or her family might not be okay for me. And then where do your concerns come from? And this might take some more like insight oriented work where you're kind of delving into maybe even how you were raised, right? And we all know that how we were raised definitely informs how we then parent our own children. So think about, where do your concerns come from? Is it from maybe your past experiences? Is it because someone on social media said, don't do that, don't put your child in timeout, and here are all the scary reasons why, which Eleanor just debunked for us? You want to be thinking critically about where your concerns are coming from so you have a better understanding of that. Also, you want to decipher between what exactly is the strategy, what is it not. You're going to challenge those misconceptions that might actually be presented in social media, making sure that the strategies that you are considering implementing have citations, the research behind it, so that you can actually say that it's effective. And then you're thinking about, could this strategy assist with meeting our family's goals and our values? Does it align with what you want to foster within your own household? And then last but not least, you identify those strategies that you will use and also how you will monitor their success. Because we all know, I think we have this pipe dream that, okay, she said that's going to work. I'm going to implement it tomorrow and we're going to have success. Unfortunately, that's not how life works. You really have to think critically about, how will I decide if this strategy is successful or not? It might be that you want to address aggression first and foremost. You implement a particular strategy, you're thinking to yourself, all right, my kiddo right now, he hits me 4 times a day. So guess what? Success would be if 2 days from now or 3 days from now, he's hitting you 3 times a day, and then maybe 2, and then maybe 1. So really thinking about how you're going to monitor the success of these strategies and looking at small steps of progress as progress and valuing that. How do you then decide when it's time to introduce a new strategy? First and foremost, one strategy at a time. Once again, we all get hopeful, right? Maybe it's New Year's, and you're like, my New Year's resolution is I'm going to implement all these great parenting strategies and they're going to work and they're going to change my life. That's going to unfortunately lead to complete failure, because when we try to do too many things at once, we can't do anything effectively or the way that it's actually intended. So instead, you want to put all your time and focus and energy on one thing. And you're thinking about, before you identify that strategy or add a new one, is, what is my goal here? What am I hoping to achieve? What is the strategy that's going to help me achieve that? And then what are the needs versus wants in my goal? You want to look at, what is the main priority right now for your family? What is significantly interfering with its functioning, right? Those are the things that you want to address first. You can address your wants later, right? We all have those dreams and aspirations, but we really need to focus on the basic needs, the things that are interfering with your family's functioning first. Then you're thinking about, have we met prior goals? And be honest with this. If you haven't made significant progress with a prior goal, you want to stick with that goal until you do. And then also just thinking about scaling back. a bit, right? A lot of times we actually have to decrease the demands on our children first before we can work up towards reintroducing it. This is where time in comes into play. If you have a child who does not like to follow directives, you are not going to start with, okay, how am I going to use effective commands? How am I going to get him to listen to me? You're going to say, nope, I need to spend time on enhancing our relationship. I'm going to start with time in first and foremost. And you might do that for several weeks before you even get to starting to implement effective commands and following through with any type of reward or consequence. Here's just a list really quickly. I know that we're already past time. Eleanor and I always have a lot to say, so it's hard to rein us in because we're passionate. But here are these evidence-based therapies to keep an eye out for. And what we want to really be clear about is that this isn't an all or nothing thing where you're sitting here thinking, oh, yeah, my child has some anxiety, but oh, I don't think I need to enroll in a full treatment program to address it. Good clinicians will offer abbreviated variations, modified versions of all of these approaches, really to meet you and your family where you are at based on your specific needs. So if you don't feel like, oh, my child's anxiety or disruptive behaviors is that, clinical significance, it's not enough to warrant a full-blown like round of treatment, guess what? Good clinicians will offer you an abbreviated variation that can help get you off on the right foot and work towards alleviating things maybe before they get more significant in nature.
Mhm. Awesome. So before we kind of sign out, we'll go through a couple of really wonderful resources. So obviously this QR code will get you the Instagram safe list and also on the list to receive the notifications when the values workbooks are completed, which I'll go through in just a moment. That list, it is a year outdated, just so you know. I need to go back through it. But last I checked, those are generally helpful Instagrams if you are interested in being on social media as a parent. And clinicians, I do recommend keeping an eye out on what's going viral. I ask every intake if they are on social media, and it is a fantastic conversation every time. So it's good to know what's out there. There are parents' guides, an excellent webinar in the ABCT Parenting and Family Special Interest Group by Dr. Linneman, and then the book Timeout in Child Behavior. And then on the next slide, it'll go, the same QR code will be listed. In this spring, one of the things that I've done, taking all of these ideas, is create these workbooks. So there will be a parent values workbook and a therapist values workbook to be used in clinic. And they should launch this spring. So if you are interested in those, feel free to jump on my email list there or just email me. I'm pretty wide open about it. And then they're also in the other slides here, there are some great ways to get a hold of us. But I think we have a couple of minutes for a Q&A. If you have any questions, we'll be able to see them. I can take the first one in here if that's helpful. So someone was asking why I don't recommend Big Little Feelings specifically. So I'm going to give a general answer. Generally, accounts that are consistent in providing evidence-based information in a nuanced way are ones that I trust. There are a handful of accounts out there that are very large that have caused a lot of problems. And when parents come into clinic and I say, who are you following? This is often one of the answers. It has gotten better, but in the scope of what I personally, and I'm not speaking for MPG, you guys can take your stance on that, but personally, I don't recommend it. It's very marketing heavy to sell rather than support, and that I am not a fan of, which does make it harder to get access to good information if you're not following these big accounts. Also, some of the people involved in that account have been part of the history of why Timeout has a bad rap. which I'm happy to share with you clinician to clinician at another time. Erika, do you want to take how long a timeout should be, and is it different for per age? It's a great
Yeah, so this is a great question. I think that Eleanor and I would probably have a time recommendation. So research shows that for children 2.5, and we don't recommend timeout actually for kids younger than that because they don't understand the concept of timeout, and how that's connected to like not following a directive or breaking a house rule. But for kids from about 2.5 up until 10, the research shows that 3 minutes is adequate to act as a reset and kind of help children understand that there's a consequence for their behavior. But the key component of timeout, regardless of the length, okay? First and foremost, whatever length you choose, stick to. We talked about consistency. The other key piece of this is that you decide when the timeout is over. A timer doesn't, a certain time limit doesn't, because otherwise what happens is, let's say you set a 3-minute timeout, timer dings. Right when the timer dings, the child was like yelling terrible things at you, calling you like really mean and the worst mom ever. They're not actually learning how to regulate and use that timeout as a reset. So what we require, like in parent-child interaction therapy, is that parents get 5 seconds of regulation, which means quiet, at the end of that 3 minutes before they let their child get off of the chair. And then it's followed with you're sitting quietly on the chair. Right. And the reason for that is now we know that the child was able to effectively use that to regulate, and now they're ready to change their behavior. So the length of the timeout, like I said, research shows 3 minutes works well, at least for those time ranges. But I would say the most important thing is that you are requiring regulation in order to end the timeout. You're deciding when the timeout ends. And then also you're not then paying any attention to your child while they're in the timeout chair, because that is then just reinforcing it. Timeout is supposed to be a complete break from your attention.
Yes. And another person just asked, what do you do if the child refuses to go to timeout? And if you're, my sixth sense here is, or my input here is, if you have a child where trying timeout at home, and if you would like to treat that, and you really think you're doing it consistently and your child's refusing to go, I would do one of two things or both. One, teach it every day for about a week. When this happens, this is the process. And show yourself going, show yourself what it looks like to be successful in timeout. Show them that it doesn't last forever. Show them what it means to be able to get out and what happens after. We do that in the clinic. And if that still isn't working, I would gather in some additional resources and help. Both of our practices are able to help you if you're really struggling, because the last thing I want you to do as a parent is to feel like, okay, well, I'm doing everything these two experts are saying and I'm still failing. You're not failing. That's really important for you to hear. This is very difficult to do on your own without support in a regulated environment. So this is very, very hard. And I feel like that's probably a good spot to end, that we can teach all day long. We can tell you what to do all day long. We can tell you what the research says, but 9 times out of 10, I'm gonna recommend getting a therapist for at least 4 to 8 sessions to help you, so you have that support. And a lot of parents say, wow, even just knowing that I have support as a parent, so I'm not alone in this, trying this new thing, that alone can be helpful, even if it's not someone who has formal PCIT training or formal PMT training. Erika, would you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've had parents say to me that I think the key component of parent training was
Mhm.
being given permission to
Yes.
do certain things and knowing that they're given permission to do things that are evidence-based, and so they can trust that they're not doing anything wrong. They're actually doing exactly what's needed for their child, and even if they need to see it through for a few weeks to see the change, they have the confidence, "I know I'm doing what I'm supposed to do,
For
and
my
the results will
particular
come."
child. Yeah. And
Yeah.
the other thing, if you have a parent, the grandparent is getting on you about doing the wrong thing that you turned out fine, highly recommend getting a therapist. And I tell all my parents, I'm the scapegoat here. Eleanor told me, so you be quiet. I put myself, and it really works beautifully if you are struggling with a grandparent who's telling you that you're parenting wrong because you turned out fine, which comes up a lot. So just throwing that out there too. Reach out for help. There are great places to get it. And what a pleasure to present with you today, Erica.
Yes, you as well, Eleanor. Thank you so much for joining me, and thank you to Madison for hosting.
Of course. Well, thank you, Erica and Eleanor, and thanks for everyone who did attend today's webinar. I believe that we've answered all of the questions that have come in, but if you have any questions that come up, feel free to email them to professionaldevelopment@manhattanpsychologygroup.com, and we will send them on so that you can get your responses. This does conclude today's presentation. I'll stay on a couple extra minutes to support with any contact hour or certificate questions. Erica and Eleanor, you do not have to stay on if you don't want to, but if you want to, you're welcome to. But thank you again.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Have a great day.